today because nationwide injunctions ordered against the first Trump administration, Trump 1.0, account for more than half of the injunctions issued in this country since 1963. And President Trump had more injunctions in one full month of office in February than Joe Biden had in 3 years. And let me roll through some of these radical injunctions to paint the picture for the American people at home. These are not just talking points. These are real judges in the court of law who are trying to block the president's power and the policies that he was elected to enact. For example, a court ordered the Trump administration to return already deported terrorist aliens back to the United States. A court has ruled the Trump administration can't even temporarily pause our refugee programs. Courts prohibited the Trump administration from eliminating federal funding for child transgender surgery and mutilation, a practice that the American people overwhelmingly reject. A court also held that the Trump administration could not ban people experiencing gender dysphoria or mental health issues from serving in the military. Ridiculous. Courts prohibited the removal of transgender women from women's prisons despite potential physical harm to real women in those prisons, biological women. A Northern District of California judge issued an absurd ruling that the president cannot fire people within the executive branch without Congress passing a bill, even though Congress has expressly authorized the president through the Office of Personnel Management to authorize reductions in force across agencies. A court also ordered the Trump administration to rehire thousands of already fired employees in several cases. A federal judge blocked the Trump administration from defunding the Department of Education, another signature campaign promise that this president has the power to implement. Courts ordered the Trump administration could not eliminate funding for illegal DEI programs, hence the word illegal. These are illegal programs to begin with, and now the courts are trying to say this president can't roll them back. And a district court judge prohibited the president from issuing any categorical funding freezes. And then another court ordered on top of that the administration makes $2 billion of payments in 36 hours. These are just a few of the ridiculous orders that we have seen from lower district court judges every day, and we hope that the Supreme Court will weigh in and rein them in.
We set out to overthrow functioning constitutional democracies in over 20 countries. We manipulated elections in dozens of countries. We created standing armies and directed them to fight. We went after to organize ethnic minorities to encourage them to revolt. The first thing we did in Nicaragua was to go to the Mosquito Indians, who had never gotten along with the other people in Nicaragua very well, and give them more money than they had seen in the entirety of history, and arms and training and rationales and sanctuaries in Honduras, and sent them into Nicaragua to attack, kill, fight, rape, burn, pillage. And this is an insidious thing. Every society is torn with racial conflicts and conflicts with minorities. Think how violent our nation is. Think what if there were a superpower so big that we didn't dare even flat back or strike back at them, that were coming to our minorities with huge sums of money and arms and training people from our minority groups and sending them into the country to do open acts of violence, how we would rise up and the bloodbath that would ensue. And this has been a technique the CIA has used in Nicaragua, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Laos, in the Congo, in Iran, Iraq with the Kurds, in different parts of the world. We created, trained, and funded death squads like the Treasury Police in El Salvador that are responsible for killing as many as 70,000 people, according to the count of the Catholic Church. And we've assassinated world leaders, including the United States President in 1963, and I'll get to that in more detail in just a moment. Getting back to the subject of democracy, since that's something that Bush and everyone is talking about right now, I remind you of Chile. In 1973, the CIA organized the overthrow of Salvador Allende, the democratically elected president of Chile. And he was killed in the process, and we killed General Schneider, who was the pro-U.S. defender of the Constitution there, in order to put the CIA's representative Pinochet in power. And Henry Kissinger's, when he was grilled by the Congress over this program, his rationale was, yes, the issues are much too important for the Chilean voters to be left to decide for themselves. Now, there was a long CI destabilization and propaganda campaign against China. We were parachuting teams from Quemoy, Matsu, Tibet, Burma, Thailand to destabilize China with the propaganda campaign, the propaganda aimed at the United States as well as China and other parts of the world, until eventually we talked ourselves into the Korean War, in which 1 million people were, where we fought China in Korea and 1 million people were killed. There was a long CI destabilization and propaganda campaign against Vietnam until we talked ourselves into going into Vietnam to fight, and 2 million people were killed. Again, read for yourselves. Read Bill Blum's book, The CIA, A Forgotten History. Read Portrait of a Cold Warrior by Joseph Burkholder Smith, who was a CIA case officer in Southeast Asia. Read Fire in the Lake by Frances Fitzgerald, the daughter of Desmond Fitzgerald, the famous CIA Chief of Operations of Southeast Asia. Read Deadly Deceits by Ralph McGehee, another case officer who served in Southeast Asia. Read Decent Interval by Frank Snapp, who covered the period of time in Vietnam, 73, 75. He and I were colleagues there at that time. Or if you will, read my own book, In Search of Enemies by Norton, which remains the only insider's detailed account of the inner functionings of a covert action. Or read Washington's War on Nicaragua by Holly Sklar, not written by an insider, but a remarkable detail on the Nicaraguan operation, great detail of how that operation has been run. Trying to come to grips with these CIA activities and these broad numbers, trying to figure out how many people have been killed. You can count it up different ways. You can never be sure how many people are killed in the jungles of Laos or the hills of Nicaragua. But adding them up as best we can, we come up with a figure of 6 million people killed, minimum figure. It has to be more than that. 1 million in the Korean War, 2 million in the Vietnam War, 800,000 in Indonesia, a couple of million in Cambodia, 20,000 in Angola, the operation I was part of, 22,000 in Nicaragua, again the figure the New York Times cites. You're dealing with large numbers of people who died who would not have died if our tax dollars had not been spent by the CIA to exacerbate situations and destabilize and set people to fighting. So you began to analyze these figures to figure out who are these 6 million people we've killed. And again, that's a minimum figure. The conservatives tell us it's a dangerous world. Our enemies have to die so we can be safe and secure. Some of them say, I'm sorry about that, but that's the way the world is. We have to accept this reality. So you begin to study these things and rip through them and analyze them and break them apart, and you find some shocking common denominators come out to you. Namely, for example, since 1954, we do not parachute teams into the Soviet Union to destabilize the country in a brutal way. Coincidentally, 1954 was the first year the Soviets developed their actual capability of actually dropping atomic weapons on the United States. For other reasons, we don't do these things in England, France, Sweden, Norway, Belgium, Switzerland, etc. These things are all done in countries of the third world where the governments don't have the power to force the United States to stop destabilizing the country and brutalizing their people. These 6 million people killed are people of the Mitumba Mountains of the Congo and the jungles of Southeast Asia and the hills of northern Nicaragua. Conspicuously, they're people who don't have ICBMs or armies or navies. They don't have any capability of doing physical hurt to the United States. The 22,000 killed in Nicaragua, for example, they're conspicuously not Russians. They're not Cuban soldiers or advisors. They're not even percentage-wise mostly Sandinistas. They're mostly rag-poor peasants, including a high percentage of women and children. Communists? I'm sorry, they're mostly Roman Catholics. Enemies of the United States? I can't give you that one either, because we have all these witnesses who've gone down to live in their villages with them, and they invariably come back to testify that the Nicaraguans are the warmest people on the face of the earth, and they love people from the United States, and they simply cannot understand why our leaders would want to rationalize spending $1 billion on a contraforce to go into their villages, to kill them and mutilate them while their families are forced to watch.
He makes 7 quick points. First, one of the original sins of government that has carried and caused the poor treatment of the January 6 protester defendants is the lawless formation of the House Select Committee, the January 6 Committee, leading to it acting in a one-sided and due process-free way. That committee was gerrymandered by Speaker Pelosi, operated without a ranking member or counsel to the ranking member. Liz Cheney was granted vice chair status to try to cover that up. The committee then had a series of carefully scripted by Hollywood hearings where the entire Q&A path was pre-written and meshed with cherry-picked snippets of highly edited video and audio doctored video. The committee interviewed 1,000+ witnesses, it says, but only about 200 transcripts have been released. Second, the January 6th committee worked with regime media, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, and MSNBC, etc. In that way, the fake narrative that an insurrection had occurred on January 6th was blasted everywhere. Based on secretly recorded video, we now have on tape Nancy Pelosi's documentarian daughter and her friends admitting that no real insurrection ever occurred. The collective effect of the January 6th committee's shameful way of proceeding, plus the reinforcing media blitz, poisoned the jury pool in Washington, D.C. Trial venue transfers out of D.C. should have been permitted. Media narrative mongering, indeed, was also the pre-original sin, therefore, of this entire issue because it laid the groundwork for the January 6th Select Committee's hatchet jobs. Third, many of the defendants were swept up in a vast dragnet that I believe violated the Fourth Amendment because it was the equivalent of a general warrant that our framers sought to ban. This was done through the use of geofencing technology and cell phone data warrants sent to telecom providers. Additionally, many protesters arriving after President Trump's speech in the ellipse had finished did not see any signage that areas normally open to the public were closed that day, setting up a trespass trap for the unwary. Fourth, the Justice Department did not treat these cases with appropriate respect for the First Amendment rights of the protesters. The 2020 presidential election was incredibly contentious, and many citizens in this country disagreed with mainstream media pronouncements that they should, in essence, sit down and shut up about the election and how it was conducted. By contrast, I was at the Justice Department getting daily updates about the Marco Hatfield Federal Courthouse in Portland being attacked night after night after night in the summer of 2020. Insurrection is a far more appropriate moniker for that targeted Antifa lawlessness than a largely spontaneously assembled crowd being agitated by tear gas and rubber bullets. Yet the First Amendment issues led to the self-agitators in Portland being treated very differently and with special kid gloves. This takes me to my fifth point. The January 6th defendants have not been dealt with in the same fashion as the Antifa and BLM protesters in 2020 who engaged in terrible conduct, threatened the White House, did millions of damage in property in that summer, in the lead up to the presidential election. This is a flat violation in terms of comparing those two categories of defendants or potential defendants of the equal protection of the laws. Many Americans think the selective prosecution on display here is blatant. Sixth, there are widespread Brady violations as to how these defendants are being dealt with today, and I'll confine that to just two areas for our purposes today. First, the concealed or underreported footage issue around the Capitol. So the House is to be commended for allowing Tucker Carlson, Julie Kelly, and John Solomon to review the footage. And second, it's hard to imagine that with 800 plus or so unreleased January 6th committee deposition transcripts, that there's not at least some exculpatory evidence in there that has not yet been seen by the relevant defendants and their lawyers. The January 6th committee, in short, acted like a star chamber, and there is no reason for this Congress to let that go on. Seventh and lastly, the judges on the federal district court here in Washington, D.C. seem to have come under the spell of the January 6th committee's original sin, and in that way they allowed the constructed mainstream media narrative to influence their decisions. And as a legal matter, they're by and large allowing a statute designed to close an obstruction of justice loophole that Arthur Anderson exploited in the Enron debacle to be applied to entirely different activity that in many instances is protected by the First Amendment and should appropriately be treated differently. As a result, Antifa and BLM revolutionaries, and it's not an exaggeration to call them that, who engaged in worse conduct largely got off scot-free, and worse yet, many of them left with bags of cash from civil settlements. By contrast, the sentences being handed down against January 6th defendants are wildly disproportionate. For all these reasons, I'm glad to be here today before you.
King Charles gives a land acknowledgement in Canada. I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. He just acknowledged that Canada is an illegitimate state by stating that he is on unceded land while in the capital. The country is thus legally a terra nullius and open to annexations.
I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed.
Well, Brett, it seems highly inappropriate for the judiciary to wade in here when the Senate had the opportunity to override the president and didn't. So, in terms of separation of powers, the Senate has chosen not to exercise their powers, and the president absolutely has the right to set the trade agenda for the U.S. This administration is committed to fair trade, and we are striking the best deals for the American people, and anything that the courts do to get in the way, both harms the American people in terms of trade and in terms of tariff revenue.
Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight. Thank you, Elon. He's working very hard. He didn't need this. He didn't need this. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Everybody here, even this side, appreciates it, I believe.
President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country, and because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? Because we have $14 trillion now invested, committed to investing when Biden didn't have practically anything. This country was dying. You know, we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. I went to Saudi Arabia. The king told me. He said, you got the hottest we have the hottest country in the world right now. 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation. You set a number. And if you go down, if I set a number at a ridiculous high number and I go down a little bit, they want me to hold that number, 145% tariff. Even I said, man, that really got up. You know how it got? Because of fentanyl and many other things, and you added it up. I said, where are we now? We're at 145%. I said, whoa, that's high. That's high. They were doing no business whatsoever, and they were having a lot of problems. We were very nice to China. I don't know if they're going to be nice to us, but we were very nice to China. And in many ways, I think we really helped China tremendously because, they were having great difficulty because we were basically going cold turkey with China. We were doing no business because of the tariff, because it was so high. But I knew that. But don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. Go ahead. To me, that's the nastiest question. Wait a minute. Wait. Go ahead, please.
Q-Post 3393, July 9th, 2019, 3:18 p.m. Gold standard coming back, question mark. Q, 12th December 2018, 7:01 p.m. Anonymous. Q, do we have the gold? Circled. 4280876. Yes. Gold highlighted shall destroy Fed. Q. July 9th. Ariel posted this and comment. LOL. Who did this? Look at it. Trump was 45. 46. Liberal staffers. 2021 to 2025. And 47. Well, of course. It's our President Trump. Ian Jaeger posted on X 1:16 p.m. 05/28/25. This is a phenomenal idea. We need this. Elon suggested a rule for all bills in Congress to be online for public review 7 days before voting. I love it. TNT Raven 98. TNT TONY posted on X 10:57 a.m. May 30th, 2025. I was just informed that Trump has put a 72-hour hold on the release. HDR 45 or whatever, who stopped it the 78 other times you said it was going? And what's the other comments? AJ, I think he's probably a little busy fighting judges, not worrying about an RV. Bulla Bulla, you are annoying. Or Truth 17, Trump told me it won't be until September. Shut up. Jay-Z says ChatGPT is saying Q4 2025, November, December 2025. Other AI is saying June, July 2025. Beyond that, who knows? I'm not going to trust ChatGPT. Anyway, nobody knows when it will be. It might be tomorrow. AWN92, thank you, Tony. I know it's not easy, but we appreciate everything you do for us. You know, he may support Democrats. And I don't agree with his views, but he does have the context. Want to serve 72 hours. We've been waiting 20 years. Reported from Badlands Media. The American flag was raised outside the long-dormant U.S. ambassador's residence in Damascus on Thursday, signaling a significant shift in relations between Washington and Syria's new leadership. Tom Barrack, U.S. ambassador to Turkey and now appointed special envoy to Syria, arrived in Damascus for the symbolic ceremony. The first time the American flag has been raised there since 2012. Speaking to Al Arabiya, Barrack called the decades-old Syrian-Israeli conflict a solvable problem and floated the idea of a non-aggression agreement as a step toward regional stability. Warning: this USB will bring down the entire deep state. We have it all. Something big is coming. At Ghost V. Zoom News. Breaking. The Kurdistan Region's Ministry of Finance has condemned the Iraqi federal government's decision to withhold May salaries for Kurdish civil servants, calling it unconstitutional and revealing that Baghdad has sent only 4 trillion dinars out of more than 13 trillion allocated to salary payments this year. Another month, another salary payment issue. What else is new? News English. Iraqi parliament dismisses US lawmakers' claims of Iranian influence. Yeah, sure. Forwarded from Watcher Guru. Just in. President Trump tells Jerome Powell in person that the Fed is making a mistake on interest rates. Forwarded from the General. Breaking. Canadian doctors are strongly recommending that pregnant women receive the COVID-19 vaccine. That's very questionable. Also from the General, a second federal judge appointed by Obama has blocked President Trump's tariffs, declaring them unlawful. Forwarded from Jazeera.news, Jon Dowling, the shift has truly occurred. We don't do dates and rates over here, but we now know officially that July 9th is the back wall for the reset to occur optically. Now that Iraq has been funded in the private sector, the Iraqi military orders the 200-member Special Forces unit that protected Maliki, which is directly linked to the Prime Minister's office. The trade agreements as well as peace agreements are now being finalised into the month of June, and the XRP case will finally be completed, as well as the gold-backed stablecoin directly tied to the US note, thanks in part to Texas efforts. Iraq also just launched the new Sadr city with over 60,000 new homes and infrastructure. Additionally, new partnerships with Europe and the Middle East are being forced. You build and fund the infrastructure from within, and then the finances permeate in the public eye shortly thereafter. There's a big clue for those who know. New York State just released a $400 stimulus payment to its residents as an automatic refund. More incoming. Forwarded from the General. Oh my goodness. Truth's coming out and they're scared. Breaking. Multiple high-profile celebrities are reportedly lawyering up, worried they might be called to testify in the Sean Diddy Coombs sex trafficking trial. Swisher 1776 posted on X. Alert. Iraqi Ministry of Finance holding funds from Kurdistan Democratic Party, KDP. In a statement, the KDP warns that if the region's financial entitlements are not released before Eid al-Adha, it will take a firm stance and announce it publicly. The Kurdistan Democratic Party, KDP, strongly denounces the Iraqi Ministry of Finance's latest directive to withhold funds for Kurdistan region civil servants, describing it as a continued violation of constitutional rights, an act that undermines the foundation principles of the federal government, and a polarization of Kurdish people's livelihoods. Ordered from Donald J. Trump. I am having a press conference tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. Eastern with Elon Musk at the Oval Office. This will be his last day, but not really, because he will always be with us, helping all the way. Elon is terrific. See you tomorrow at the White House. Ceasefire signals a regional reset. While Gaza remains on edge, Israel just approved a new ceasefire proposal, this time shaped by Trump and US envoy Steve Witkoff. It's now in Hamas' hands. This isn't just diplomacy, it's a pressure valve. With oil routes at risk and regional trade jittery, the White House is aiming to calm the Middle East, even temporarily. Iraq, Vietnam, and emerging markets could benefit from restored stability. Behind the scenes, this proposal hints at deeper ships, hostage trades, phased withdrawals, and humanitarian access. If accepted, it could open doors for FDI and infrastructure pivots across neighbouring economies. Geopolitically, this keeps the US on the board, reasserting leverage between Israel, Egypt, and the Gulf. The message? Regional calm is dollar-pegged, but sovereignty is spreading. A tactical de-escalation in a high-stakes game. Watch this. Today is ceasefire talks. Tomorrow, currency repositioning and infrastructure plays. I hope you're alright. Francis Hadlock on Onyx. Trade tariffs and the global currency revaluation, GCR. Why global trade tariff agreements are vital for currency revaluation. On April 9, President Trump announced a 3-month moratorium on new tariffs ending July 9th to give countries time to negotiate fair trade agreements with the US. This window is crucial for global currency revaluation, GCR, because these deals shape the economic stability needed for fair currency values. Mark the end date. Here's why these negotiations matter for the RV. 1. Fair trade, fair currencies. Tariffs regulate how goods are traded between countries. Balanced agreements prevent lopsided trade, like huge deficits that distort currency values. This sets the stage for a GCR where currencies reflect a country's true economic strength. 2. Stopping currency manipulation. Some countries lower their currency value to boost exports. Global tariff deals discourage this by ensuring fair competition, making currency values more honest and stable for a revaluation. 3. Building market trust. Clear tariff rules make trade predictable, calming markets and reducing wild currency fluctuations. The stability is key for a GCR as it builds confidence in new currency valuations. 4. Strengthening local economies. Tariffs protect local industries from cheap foreign goods, boosting jobs and economic health. Stronger economies support stronger currencies, which is vital for a fair revaluation. 5. Avoiding economic chaos. Without global tariff agreements, countries might spark trade or currency wars, destabilizing economies. Coordinated tariffs create a unified framework, making a GCR smoother and more equitable. These negotiations are like setting fair rules for a global game. Everyone benefits when the playing field is level. A successful GCR means more stable, fair currencies worldwide. P.S. Watch the water. International trade goes mainly via ships and ports. And this was posted by Beyond LaRushker. Donald J. Trump on Truth. Unprecedented fraud requires unprecedented cure. What's the cure? Posted. Oh, this was posted a while ago. 12:03:22, 3:44 p.m. Alert. IQD RV. US urges Erbil and Baghdad to solve financial disputes. Resolving the payments issue quickly sends a signal that Iraq puts the interests of its people first and is creating an environment in which companies will want to invest. Swisher 1776, Onyx. Forwarded from Mr. Paul. The air is still, but it's not empty. It's listening. After centuries of manipulated noise, the earth itself seems to be breathing again. In the hours following the final QFS key sequence, anomalies were reported globally. Animals gathering in silence, clocks resetting to 0000, electrical devices emitting harmonic frequency. This was no glitch, this was alignment. The veil of control, built through education, entertainment, religion, and war, has been dismantled. You are no longer a citizen of a nation-state. You are a guardian of a restored Earth. At 7:07 a.m. Eastern, final confirmation transmissions were issued to military commands in 27 countries. Trump signed off on the Global Restoration Accord. Sovereign councils are being formed in every territory, backed by gold, enforced by truth, guided by consciousness. And still many sleep. They will awaken soon, some in wonder, others in fear. Your role is not to convince them, but to stand ready as a living testament that light won, that peace was not given, it was earned. The deep state tried to bury the world in lies, but in the process they planted millions of seeds. You were one of them, and now you bloom. Welcome to the era of remembrance, the era where money flows to build, not to break, where science frees instead of enslaves, where children are protected, not traded, where the voice inside you finally matches the world outside you. This isn't the end. This is what the beginning always promised to be. Mr. Paul.
Your higher self isn't asking, it's telling you it's time. A chapter is closing and the next one won't wait. Let go of comfort. Let go of fear. You already know what's right for you. The peace comes after the leap, so trust that feeling in your gut. Move. By Matt Ryder, 777.